Excellent. All right. Welcome, everyone, to day 5 of our climate talks for the city of Fremont as part of our climate action update. Today, we'll be talking about green business and market innovation. We've got some really amazing speakers for you. So we'll kick us off as usual, just give you a rundown of the agenda today. Rachel is going to give us an update on the CAP update process. We'll hear from our panelists for about 10 minutes after that. We'll take a few questions from the chat, and then we'll leave about 20 or 25 minutes for community discussion and questions. Finally, we're going to close out by reminding you about the Consider It platform, which will be open for maybe a week or two longer, and tell you what's coming up next. So just a reminder to use the chat box to voice your questions and concerns. And if you are on a phone, that you can use *9 to raise your hand.
All right, thanks, Robbie. So to kick us off, I'm just going to do a little bit of an overview of what the Climate Action Plan is and where we currently are at with our efforts before we dig into the content for the day. So to start off, our Climate Action Plan that we currently have is from 2012. It was our first Climate Action Plan that the city adopted. And it sets a roadmap for how we can undertake specific actions at the city level to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, recognizing that there's a lot of activity that also is happening at the regional, state, and federal level, and global level as well. So our first Climate Action Plan set a goal of a 25% greenhouse gas emissions reduction by the year 2020. And now that we're in 2021, it's time to update that. Next slide, Robbie. So to start off with our CAP update process, back in February of 2019, the Fremont City Council adopted a carbon neutrality resolution. And that says that the city of Fremont aims to be a carbon neutral city, net zero carbon emissions by the year 2045. And we set an interim target to achieve a 55% emissions reduction by the year 2030. We also, in that post-carbon community framework, have some overarching values and key strategies that will help guide us to our carbon neutrality goal. Next slide, Robbie. So our post-carbon framework values include equity and access. We want to make sure that the solutions to climate change are helping everyone and not leaving anyone behind, and that they're accessible to all members of our community. We also really want to put forth efficiency and innovation. We want to use resources as efficiently as possible. And we also, have a lot of innovation happening already in our community that we want to leverage as much as possible. Health and wellness is extremely important. We're living in a time where, we're in a very different reality because of a global pandemic, and thinking about all of the impacts to health that we may experience in the future from various events related to our climate, such as heat waves, droughts, flooding. We definitely want to put health and wellness first and foremost. And then finally, resiliency and capacity building. So being able to respond to events in our community that happen, whether they're directly or indirectly climate related in the future, is super important. We want to be able not only to respond, but to be more adaptable and resilient to those. And we want to continue to increase our capacity around that and our ability for our community to work together as a whole. Next slide. In terms of strategies to get us to carbon neutrality, what we have here are some of the ways that we feel are kind of the key carbon reduction efforts. And so clean and renewable power, and also switching away from fossil fuels in our homes and in our transportation systems and moving to electric systems that use that clean and renewable power are, two of the really big strategies. And we talked quite a bit about those earlier this week. We also are looking at carbon sequestration. How can we draw down those atmospheric carbon particles in the form of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and bring them back into a solid carbon form? And that is done at the local level, primarily through our urban forests and ecosystems. And so we talked quite a bit about that yesterday. Mobility and connectivity is also really important, as we think about how do we get ourselves around in our community, transitioning to cleaner vehicles, modes of transport that are not just single occupancy vehicles, increasing our infrastructure to help people get around on bikes and walking. Those are all really big strategies as well. And we talked quite a bit about that during our land use and mobility session on Tuesday. And then resource conservation and elimination of waste, using our resources wisely, trying to get toward the goal of ultimately zero waste is super important. And so we had some great speakers on that topic earlier this week as well. And so I'm saying all this because we'll have recordings of all these sessions. If you weren't able to make it to those sessions, you can review that material. And then finally, looking at how do we develop in concert with nature, how do we incorporate green infrastructure, and then how do we become more adaptive and resilient are other ways that we can move toward our carbon neutral goals. Next slide, Robbie. So in terms of emissions, back in 2000, we did our first greenhouse gas emissions inventory for the year 2005. We did it in about 2007, 2008, kind of reflecting back. And that set our goal for our 25% emissions reduction by the year 2020. As you can see over time, we've done inventories, in the interim years, and we have actually achieved our 2020 goal and exceeded that by the year 2018. The largest reduction has really come in the form of building energy consumption as we've moved toward a cleaner electric grid, as well as installed solar on rooftops in our community. We've really tapered off the emissions associated with electricity usage. And what we're left with is a lot of emissions associated with fossil fuel consumption in both vehicles and in buildings. Now, in the projected emissions portion of this chart, you'll see that the target for a 55% emission reduction goal by 2030 is with that second star. And the emissions reductions that are forecasted don't get us there. And that's because this is based on adopted California legislation that's currently in place, not looking at legislation that might be adopted in the future, not looking at what's happening at the federal level yet, because all of that is still underway. And so really, we have a gap to close here, and that's the whole focus of the Climate Action Plan, is how do we close this gap with local actions that we can undertake to get us to our 55% target. Next slide, Robbie. In terms of local actions, we're talking about a lot of different things. We can adopt local ordinances and modify our building and zoning codes to affect new construction and retrofits. We can develop and work in partnership with regional agencies for incentive programs for energy efficiency, water efficiency. We can also work with groups like the Green Business Program to recognize efforts that we are seeing in our communities already. We can focus on our own city infrastructure, adding solar to some of our facilities and retrofitting our streetlights to LEDs, for instance. We also can collaborate regionally, and we have some great relationships with agencies in Alameda County. Here today with us, we have Stop Waste and East Bay Community Energy, who serve Fremont on a regional basis with energy and waste reduction efforts and clean energy efforts. Then we can also, advocate for changes at the state and federal level that will help us meet our local greenhouse gas emissions reduction goals. And part of that is to also identify resources to help us do that. So going after grant funding, from all levels of government that can help us meet our goals is really important, because we recognize that some of the stuff will cost a good amount of money, and we want to pull in as many resources as possible to do that. And through all this, collaboration is extremely important. We are the local city government. We have other public agencies that serve our community, such as the Water District and the Waste Management Authority. We also, have a lot of community members who are very, interested in what we can do and what they can do to help. And, both on the residential and commercial level, we want to work as much as possible to help you meet your goals and to help us meet our goals in partnership. And so, that's why you're all here today. And we're looking forward to a robust conversation as we dive deeper into this topic area. Next slide, Robbie. Finally, I just wanted to highlight that we have been doing quite a bit of community outreach already through our climate action plan update process thus far. We kicked this off with a big workshop in September. We had about 160 participants from the community to help us, vision what a sustainable future for Fremont would look like. Now we have a series of climate talks that we're diving into various subject areas and really getting more specific feedback from the community on what you would like to see. And then we will be planning another workshop in the near future on the topic of resilience and equity, adaptation, and really helping to foster community connections on a larger scale, because we recognize that in order to implement our climate action plan, we can't do this in a vacuum. Then finally, we have launched an online forum called Consider It. Robbie, you can go to the next slide. And this is a virtual community forum where you can specifically weigh in on different possible strategies to help us get to carbon neutrality. So this is not our proposal for what exactly is going into the climate action plan, but these are strategies that we've identified as possible approaches. We've seen them in other communities, and we really want the community to give us input on, what do you think of these different strategies? What are your concerns? What are you excited about? What do you, who do you think would be helpful for us to talk to think about implementing this? And then if you have your own ideas, you can add those in as well to this platform and kind of propose your own strategy. So it's a great way to have a conversation with the community about these topics. And we encourage you, if you haven't already, to participate in the forum. We're going to keep it up for the next week or so, so that folks who've participated in the climate talks this week have an opportunity to weigh in. And you can also respond to other people's comments as well. So diving into our topic of today, green business and market innovation. I'm going to kick it off, and then I'm going to hand it off to our lovely panel of speakers here. So next slide, Robbie. To start off, I wanted to show that, business activities in Fremont represent 44% of our total greenhouse gas emissions. And so, for the sectors that aren't included here, in the 44%, you can see there's passenger vehicle emissions and home energy consumption, and then waste kind of as its own category. But in the commercial and industrial space, we have gas consumption in buildings, and that's, just kind of standard end uses like water heating and, heating of buildings and cooking, but also processing for manufacturing. And then we also have electricity consumption in buildings. And again, I want to mention that this has tapered down significantly over the last handful of years as we've cleaned up the grid, as we've joined East Bay Community Energy to supply even more renewable power into our local electricity mix. And then as we've seen more and more solar installations. And then freight transportation is a huge one. And so this is, both medium and heavy duty freight vehicles that are transporting, goods into and out of Fremont. So this isn't even capturing the emissions associated with the freight vehicles that are passing through Fremont on, say, 880 or 680, but aren't stopping in Fremont. This is specifically the emissions related to vehicles that are either starting or ending trips in Fremont. Next slide. So how can we get to zero emissions in the business sector, recognizing that this is a pretty significant portion of our emissions in our community? There's a lot of ways we can do this, and we're going to dive more into these throughout the conversation. But just to sort of start us off, I wanted to highlight some of the big areas of opportunity. So energy efficiency and innovation is really key. Implementing high efficiency appliances and processes, and then also integrating in, new innovation, adaptive design, thinking about demand management. These are all really important to reduce total energy consumption. And then moving into that zero carbon electricity, and also energy storage. So supplying, as much power as we can with on-site or local renewables, and then what we can't, supplying that with clean energy from the grid. And we can also integrate in energy storage to ensure that power is available to facilities if the grid power goes out. So we're talking about, backup battery power, for instance. And then low carbon and no pollution manufacturing. So as we really think about how do we taper those emissions associated with fossil fuel consumption, we want to move as many processes as possible to electric processes, but we also recognize that with so much manufacturing in our community, there may still be a need for combustion in those processes. And so moving toward cleaner fuels like biofuel, hydrogen, or synthetic gas, and replacing the fossil gas that's currently being used in the form of natural gas from PG&E. And then, we get into the vehicle space, zero emission, medium and heavy duty fleet vehicles. So, focusing on, battery electric vehicles. There's also, the possibility of hydrogen fuel cell vehicles in this medium, heavy duty space. And then really making sure that there is robust EV charging infrastructure to support that transition. And that means, really ensuring that we have enough power capacity in the grid as well to support that. And then looking, more at what's happening in the material production and also the physical materials that go into our built environment, and thinking about the life cycle emissions associated with that. So not just the emissions that are coming from what we're doing in operating a building, but also what materials are used when that building was built, in terms of concrete and steel, and how can we start to taper the emissions down there. And then finally, we get into the space of what we like to call a circular economy. So looking at really robust materials, reuse and repurposing. So shifting from what we used to call a cradle to grave perspective, where we would extract raw materials and then use them until we can't use them, and then we would send them to the landfill, and moving into this cradle to cradle space where materials are continuously recycled and repurposed, and never actually end up in the landfill. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to our economic development manager, Donovan, who's going to talk a little bit more about business in Fremont. And then we also have speakers from East Bay Community Energy and Stop Waste who will follow Donovan. So Donovan, take it away.
Thank you, Rachel. And as Rachel said, I am part of the economic development team here at the City of Fremont. We are a small but mighty team that is tasked with facilitating business activity and investments within the city. And that can be working with a range of businesses, starting with a mom and pop restaurant, all the way up to, Fortune 500 company like Tesla and everything in between. We also work a lot with development facilitation and, a lot of kind of land use related issues and helping development that aligns with the city's general plan and land use regulations, and really kind of just vision for the future. And so ultimately, all this leads to a higher quality of life for our residents because, these types of investments from businesses bring in jobs, they bring in money for the city. That's really critical for paying for police and fire and, parks and everything that our residents have come to expect. So there's a lot to cover and I have a very short amount of time. So I'm going to focus specifically today on, sorry, can we go next slide, please? And I'm going to focus specifically today on business and industry. And the reason for that is if you recall the slide with the pie chart that Rachel had showed, there is really a considerable amount of work that still needs to be done in order to make our business and industry cleaner. I think a lot of progress has been made, but this is really the low-hanging fruit outside of converting our passenger vehicles to electric. And so when we think about business and industry in a Fremont context, Fremont is really known as the hardware side of the Bay in Silicon Valley. This is where the physical products are designed and manufactured in many cases. And in Fremont, our bread is really buttered with manufacturing. So 1 in 4 jobs here in the city are actually in the manufacturing sector. It accounts for more of our tax revenues than anything else. It's a considerable driver for both sales and use tax as well as property tax. And it's also an area where I think we have a lot of synergy with the work that's being done with the Climate Action Plan. And yes, apologies for the blurry image there. Next slide, please. And so when we think about where innovation in Silicon Valley takes place today, the Silicon Valley of old, it was really the, kind of glorified garage. We all heard about the Silicon Valley garage where, Hewlett Packard or Apple, were first launched, and these businesses were able to operate out of a, suburban single family home for considerable amounts of time. Well, today that's not the case, and the innovation really takes place in a lot of Fremont's industrial parks. And so you might have one of these kinds of nondescript buildings like you see here on the right. You wouldn't really think that there's anything necessarily of significance going on the inside, but that could be, as in this instance, the site where a company is making flying electric passenger drones. And so there's just a lot of innovation that is taking place in Fremont, and there's a lot of elements that I won't get into today for why Fremont is so well positioned to capture a lot of growth, especially in clean technology. Next slide, please. So when we think about the growth industries in Fremont, where are the bulk of our new jobs coming from? They tend to be in 3 different buckets. The first is what we call advanced manufacturing. We have over 900 companies in Fremont that make physical products and parts. And so that's a really kind of driver for our economy. Where we've seen a lot of growth has been in the life sciences space, pharmaceutical products, medical devices and equipment, but also very exciting and relevant to this conversation, clean tech. And we kind of lump auto tech into that category as well. And so this includes companies working on self-driving fleet vehicles and other types of EV vehicles. This includes companies working on battery development. We now have 2 of the only lithium battery manufacturing plants in the entire state of California operating in Fremont, and I expect that there will be more. So this is a really exciting area where we have a convergence of the region's high technology with a lot of kind of sustainability goals that our region, our state has, certainly our city has. Next slide, please. And just to show you a handful of the companies that operate in Fremont's clean tech space. So we have companies like Tesla that are doing, building electric vehicles. We have companies that are building, solar panel related equipment, helping to make it more efficient and more economical. We have companies that are making the latest and greatest LED lighting fixtures that make the current LEDs that you could find at Home Depot seem like a thing of the past. And we have a lot of companies working on battery technology too. And that's been a really exciting space for us. Next slide, please. And where is this all taking place? Well, a lot of it is taking place in and around the city's Warm Spring Innovation District. And this is an area where the city has really prioritized a lot of its future growth. As many of you may be aware, about 5 years ago now, the city opened up the Warm Springs South Fremont BART station. And that in turn has really spurred a lot of development, particularly with a lot of like multifamily development growth near the BART station, but also kind of coincided with Tesla's really strong growth and expansion. So we now have a factory with as many as 15,000 employees, and one of the largest factories in the world, I should say, that is right on a BART station line. And it's one of the few drivers of demand for traffic in the southbound direction, because folks are typically commuting up to Oakland and San Francisco. So it's really important for a lot of reasons. And this is where we're really prioritizing a lot of the growth and development for Fremont industry. Next slide, please. And so I just want to share a couple of, a few examples where we think there's some real opportunity, to help move the needle on sustainability. So the first is, working with companies, to build higher quality, more sustainable projects. And this is most evident when you have a company that's building a headquarters location for themselves. And a couple of examples here, Seagate's headquarters in Fremont, it's a LEED Silver building, but it has a lot of really interesting features. It has a 1 megawatt rooftop solar system. It recirculates indoor water and also collects rainwater from the roof. And that allows it to run a lot of the kind of internal utilities much more efficiently. Delta Electronics has their North America headquarters in Fremont, and they've been really using this. And Delta Electronics is also a clean tech company, and so they've been using this building as a way to pilot and market a lot of their kind of latest and greatest clean technologies, everything from EV charging to solar panel inverters to building automation and equipment. So this is a really exciting company for us, and I'll share a little bit more here shortly. And so those prior examples were new construction, right? And these are companies that are building headquarters. They're going to be spending a lot more money than your typical manufacturing business, which is going to lease or purchase an existing building. And that's really the challenge for us, right? Only about 1% to 2% of our total building stock turns over every year for new development. And so the vast majority of our emissions profile comes from our existing building stock. So how do we make these low-slung industrial buildings more efficient? And this is one case study that I'm very excited to share with you. This is a Sonic Manufacturing. They operate North America's first zero net energy manufacturing facility. It's an 18-hour day, 7-day-a-week operation, 80,000 square feet, and they basically did something very innovative, right? Whereas typically, if a business doesn't own the building, there's very little incentive for them to make major investments in that building to improve the efficiency if the ROI is not extremely low. So if it's even like a 10-year payback period, if you're renting a building, you're going to spend that money somewhere else, especially if you're a low margin business like a manufacturer. But they have a very forward-thinking landlord, fortunately, and he saw an opportunity here. So he made the investments to include, on-site rooftop solar and parking solar array, made investments in the insulation and the lighting, and the building's electrical. And all of that was a total investment of about $3.5 million. He was able to take advantage of several tax credits. So why did he do this? Out of the goodness of his heart? No, he's a landlord and he wants to make money too. But what they were able to do was renegotiate the lease with Sonic Manufacturing so that they were paying a higher monthly rent, but it was still lower than the electricity bill that they would have otherwise been paying. And so this landlord was able to lock the tenant in for another 10 years at a higher rate, while the manufacturer has the benefit of operating with more certainty because they know they're not going to have an electricity bill. And they're also now able to use this to market to other companies and potential customers that they are a clean manufacturer. Next slide, please. And so, yeah, this was just a really, cool quote from the business, basically saying like, it's difficult to operate a manufacturing business in such a high cost area like Silicon Valley. And, in order for us to remain competitive on a global scale within a globalized economy, we really need to be investing in next generation facilities. So next slide. And then this was another case study I wanted to share with you. Many of the folks on this call may already be familiar with this, but Fremont a couple of years ago was able to launch a public-private partnership where with the help of CCC funding, they were able to install 3 microgrids at Fremont fire stations. And so these microgrids provide backup power that is able to keep these facilities running in the event of a power outage. It's helping to reduce the shed peak demand from the operations. And this is really an example of a great public-private partnership in particular, because we had 3 Fremont companies that actually participated in the design, engineering, and build out of this project, including Delta Electronics, which is the manufacturer of the batteries. Next slide, please. And so I'm going to end with this. The future is electric. We are really at the cusp of a mass wave of electrification within our economy, certainly our transport, and looking especially from a commercial standpoint, fleets and freight. Fleets will definitely come a little before freight, just because of some of the economics and challenges with converting 18-wheelers to all electric, but it's coming. And electric buildings are definitely something that we're going to be seeing as more and more of commonplace. The photo that I have here is a rendering of Adobe's new building in downtown San Jose, which is all electric. It's one of the first all electric projects in our region. It's under construction right now. We're hoping to have some to show in Fremont soon. And that is it for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Donovan. Great overview of some really exciting stuff happening in Fremont. So quickly, I want to hand over the mic now to Zach Thompson from East Bay Community Energy. He'll talk a little bit about who East Bay Community Energy is and specifically what they're doing in the space of freight vehicle electrification.
Yeah, all right. Thanks, Rachel. And hi, everyone. I'm Zach Thompson. I'm on our local programs team at East Bay Community Energy, or EBCE. And I know Rachel mentioned us a couple times earlier in her slides, but in case you're not super familiar with who we are your community choice electricity provider. So we actually go out and we procure utility scale electricity on behalf of our member cities. So that, of course, includes Fremont, but we also serve the rest of Alameda County, aside from the city of Alameda, which has its own municipal utility. And starting this year, we'll also be serving the city of Tracy, which is out in neighboring San Joaquin County. So we provide the electricity to residential, public, commercial, industrial accounts. And that is then distributed through PG&E's transmission and distribution system. So we actually just show up as a line item on your PG&E bill for electricity generation. And so, Rachel sort of mentioned what EBCE has done in terms of sort of cleaning up the electricity grid. And so our main goal really as the community choice energy provider and as a public agency is to go out and procure more renewable energy and provide it at a lower cost to our customers than the investor-owned utility would. And then as a public agency, all of our revenue goes towards overhead and operations, and then whatever is left over is redistributed back into the community through local programs. And so that's the team that I'm on. And I'm particularly focused on our transportation electrification programs, but also our resilience programs, so solar and battery energy storage, things like that. But for this discussion, since we're sort of focusing on the commercial sector here a little bit more, I am just going to be talking about what we're doing specifically with medium and heavy duty transportation, and specifically on the side of goods movement. And so you've heard a bit about what we're doing to provide cleaner electricity. And so now what we're trying to get more into is having a role in transitioning vehicles in our service area away from fossil fuels and onto that clean electricity. And particularly the medium and heavy duty vehicles that tend to operate more heavily on diesel that has more local air quality impacts. And so this is particularly important because Rachel in her slide with the pie chart of Fremont's greenhouse gas emissions, you saw the big impact that freight transportation has on emissions there. And so we know that there are over 1,000 of these medium and heavy duty goods movement vehicles registered in Fremont. But then to Rachel's earlier point too about those are just the trips that are originating and ending in the city of Fremont, but that doesn't take into account who's passing through the city. And so that's where we sort of hope to come into play and be able to help more because there are over 15,000 of these medium and heavy duty goods movement vehicles registered in our service area. So what we're focused on really here that I'm going to talk about is this big goal that we have for our service area of creating this first mover market or this sort of beachhead market for zero emission class 3 through 6 vehicle goods movement by 2030. And also enabling the transition of zero emission class 7 through 8 vehicles in the goods movement sector by 2040. So this includes engaging key stakeholders, providing technical assistance to fleets, and developing actions necessary to scale the charging infrastructure investment and in the workforce development that's needed to transition these vehicles to zero emission vehicles. So we're working with CalSTART on this effort. We're doing a data analysis of not only the DMV registration data that we have that we're able to get as a public agency, but also through CalSTART's vehicle data set. And that's really sort of looking at an analysis of vehicle readiness in terms of zero emission vehicles. So which vehicles are out there right now that these fleets can transition to, and sort of using that to identify some target fleets that have a good number of those types of vehicles that can be transitioned in the near term, and developing technical assistance pilots with those fleets. So that this also includes a lot of relationship building, not just with the port where a lot of these vehicles operate, but also outside of the port, because we know that the vast majority of these vehicles are actually registered outside of port property. They're all over the county, really. And so also working with third-party logistic providers, fleet users and operators. And then sort of a second part of this scope will later on be focusing on school districts and helping them transition their fleets in the same way of providing this type of technical assistance. And CalSTART actually administers the sort of main incentive for for transitioning these types of vehicles over to electric. And so they'll be helping with that as well, but then we'll also be providing technical assistance to some target fleets in terms of external funding opportunities. So the California Energy Commission a little while back put out a solicitation for developing blueprints for transitioning these medium and heavy duty vehicles to zero emission. So we applied for that along with CalSTART, and we're waiting to hear back on that. But regardless of the outcome of the funding opportunity, we'll pursue that scope of work anyways. And so we'll of course be coordinating with Fremont and other stakeholders as well on that. And then we've also been working with the EPA on assessing current brownfields for the opportunity of cleaning those up and transitioning those into these common fast charging yards for both light duty vehicles and on the medium and heavy duty vehicle side as well. And so we recently applied for sort of a follow-up solicitation for that. So that's sort of the main things on what we're doing on the medium and heavy duty side. But we're also supporting our transit agencies who are sort of doing their own work on this as well. But, you know, as the electricity provider, we're happy to do what we can to support them. And then we also have several other efforts going on the light duty vehicle side, but this is mainly what I wanted to focus on for this discussion. And I'm happy to touch on any of this further or answer any questions that come up.
Thanks, Zach. Yeah, really exciting potential here. And while it's still in the early stages, we recognize that this is a really key area for the city of Fremont, and are looking forward to working very closely with EBCE to implement emissions reductions efforts in this space. So really exciting stuff to come. And finally, we want to hand over the mic to Mia Kitahara from Stop Waste, and she will be talking a little bit more about the concept of a circular economy and what that means in the context of the city of Fremont.
Thanks, Rachel. Thanks for having me. I'll try to be quick, seeing the time. So Stop Waste, we're a county level government agency working towards landfill obsolescence. And in that role, we often grapple with the complex interplay between local action and global systems that have a huge influence on what can happen locally. And it's similar, on the climate conversation around materials in the economy. We live in a system of global supply chains that are, for the most part, invisible to us, and they can feel out of our hands. We don't have the same kind of direct control as we do with things like driving habits, vehicle choices, appliance upgrades, and installing solar. So these emissions don't typically make it into local inventories, but they're significant. And when you look at the total amount of what Rachel was saying before, life cycle or embodied emissions of products that we consume here, they can amount to more than the emissions of our vehicle travel or our building energy usage. Here are just some examples kind of by magnitude of where those emissions can come from. And consumer choices can make a difference, and how we shape our economies locally can make a difference. So that's what I'm excited to talk to you about today. And then moreover, the kinds of consumer choices that would reduce supply chain emissions can also be good for local communities and economies. So the graphic before, which was just a line, was depicting a linear or extractive economy. And the supply chain emissions that come from the extraction phase, producing, all the way to disposing, and things going into landfill and creating methane emissions. So in the materials management space, looking at material flows and the GHG emissions associated with that, we see this, okay, you can go to the next slide now, push towards a more circular and clean way of meeting our economic and resource needs, like Rachel was mentioning just now and at the beginning. So the tighter we make these loops, more of the supply chain that we can avoid, along with the corresponding emissions. And we retain greater economic value and utility in the products and materials. And this higher value resource tends to stay closer to us geographically, bringing economic opportunities closer to home as well. And this topic excites us at Stop Waste, especially because of the variety in the potential solutions. On the transportation and building energy usage sides, there are some clear answers for reducing emissions, and they're great, been researched and documented, and Rachel mentioned them earlier, and throughout the rest of this week, you heard about them. But when it comes to reinventing our material economy, the possibilities are still just being imagined. So here, for the sake of time, I won't go line by line, but we'll point out a few highlights. Services in general, UC Berkeley research has shown that they have a lower emissions per dollar spent. So we can focus on spending our kind of discretionary budgets on local services and creating opportunities there. Also with the work that Donovan was highlighting and EBC's Clean Grid and electrification, things made here are going to have a smaller carbon footprint than things made elsewhere, in addition to reducing transportation emissions if they're the things that we're consuming here as well. So localizing supply chains where it makes sense and is appropriate. And then the close the loop and extend the life are all of those circular economy type of solutions. New tech platforms are enabling us to share better, get better utilization out of things that are not just sitting around, and supporting reverse logistics, which is a fancy way to say getting the old stuff to places that can be reused and repaired, refurbished, or into recycling markets. And on the building side, deconstruction could have a huge benefit regionally, just moving the salvaged goods around from the old buildings that are deconstructed to new construction. And there's a lot of opportunity for other kinds of lower embodied carbon construction materials. I saw Blue Planet mentioned in the chat, for example. And then kind of on the pioneering edge, the seedling edge of renewable resources, we're seeing that in addition to agriculture and food being grown renewably, building materials, plant-based building materials could have a bigger part to play, and textiles as well. And these have the opportunity and potential to also be grown in a regenerative way that sequesters carbon into the soil, in addition to storing the carbon in kind of the above ground parts that are then used in materials and can eventually be composted again. So that's an interesting place also, because, for example, in the building material space, the cost, once it scales, could come to parity with other building strategies. But where the cost comes from, it's mostly in labor and not in the materials and the supplies. So instead of sending our money away to distant suppliers, we're paying our local builders more with a little bit more labor intensive building practices. So I'll just end with the thought that these economic activities can strengthen community relationships as we do and supply each other with goods more locally, building relationships and economic diversity. And to underscore also what Donovan was saying, that Fremont really is playing a leadership role in creating the products that will also lower emissions way beyond its borders. And when it comes to global greenhouse gas emissions, it's really less about where you're reducing the emissions, but how much what you're doing locally reduces net overall emissions wherever they're happening. So thanks, Rachel.
Thanks, Mia. Yeah, a lot of different approaches there, but really exciting to think about the possibilities. So we've had a little bit of discussion in the chat, and I just want to bring up a few things that have come up. So let's see. So there was a kind of a suggestion from Shanti around Blue Planet cement, which is a low carbon cement that's actually manufactured locally, I believe, in Los Gatos. So, there's some really exciting opportunities for thinking about the lowering of emissions in the materials that are used in construction. And Stop Waste has been, spending a lot of time, looking into some of these opportunities. We know the County of Marin has actually adopted a low carbon concrete ordinance, and a few other cities have followed suit with that to require that low carbon concrete be used in new construction. So these are all some, really exciting spaces to look at as well. There was a question from Kevin Joseph, who said, with long-term electrification, how do we plan on handling the recycling of batteries? So I'm assuming that question is in relation to both the batteries used in vehicles and also thinking about batteries for backup storage options. Just to mention, there are a lot of opportunities for recycling batteries on the kind of residential household hazardous waste side of things. And Lori, I think, can share a resource in the chat related to that. But in terms of vehicles, there's right now, what I'm aware of is there's some kind of emerging opportunities and pilot projects where they're taking used batteries from some of the earlier electric vehicles, like the first run of Nissan Leafs, and actually putting those into battery storage for facilities. I actually was just talking to some folks who have a cooperative grocery out in the Sierra foothills that are working with the California Energy Commission on a project to do just that. So it's an early kind of stage, but there are some really exciting opportunities to think about how do we reuse and repurpose and refurbish rather than, so that's that circular economy perspective here. Is there anything that, Donovan or Zach or Mia, you want to add to the battery piece?
Yeah, I could add a little bit. I know BMW did a similar type of pilot to what you were talking about there, Rachel, where with their early BMW i3 batteries, once those were sort of no longer all that usable in the vehicle, they essentially manufactured those so that they can just pull them straight out of the vehicle and plug them into like a power wall type of thing. And so they have been operating, I know at least one of their manufacturing facilities off of those batteries from the vehicles. And then I know that through the US Department of Energy, through some of their national labs, they're doing a lot of research and pilot programs on EV battery recycling as well.
Thanks, Zach. Another question specifically for Donovan. Do we know the percentage of Fremont business owners that are also residents of the city of Fremont?
No, that's very difficult data to cross-reference. But I can say anecdotally, when we go out and meet with some of our larger employers, we often hear that they're very appreciative that the city of Fremont has stepped up to build a meaningful supply of housing over the last few years, and that a lot of their employees up and down the pay scale do reside in Fremont. And as we've brought more businesses to Fremont, really since the Great Recession, we've had a tremendous amount of growth here, and a lot of workers who were previously commuting to San Francisco or to kind of the West Bay Peninsula area now have really quality job opportunities in Fremont, so they're not having to do those super long commutes anymore, which is great. So I'm hoping to build on that momentum.
Awesome. Thanks, Donovan. Somebody asked about solar windows, and I think that's there's some different opportunities where there's solar integrated into things like glass, or I've even seen like solar paint. So, there are some really cool emerging technologies where we can actually put solar into different elements of the building facade. So, those are newer, and they don't produce as much solar as a typical solar photovoltaic panel, but they are still, feasible possibilities. They do tend to cost a lot more too, though. And so when we're thinking about, maximizing our efficiency with innovations, especially in the existing building space, looking at, retrofitting and putting solar just directly on a roof is probably the most practical approach. There's also a question, Lori Mara is with us, I believe, unless she had to jump off. Oh, no, she's still there. Lori, there was a question about commercial composting
Looks like
in Fremont.
Actually, in the chat.
Oh, okay, yeah. So she did respond in the chat. Great. And yeah, so there's also a question about solar access, and we can actually follow up about that. But in terms of if you have existing solar on your facility or your home or your business, there are some laws in place actually at the state level. If somebody planted trees after you installed your solar, then you can kind of have them trim their trees per the requirements in the state law. But if those trees already existed and then you install your solar, you really don't have any leverage there. We did pass a solar protection or solar preservation ordinance a couple of years ago that also protects the solar access on your roof, even if you haven't installed solar yet, from being shaded by a new construction. So say in a residential neighborhood, your neighbor wants to put a second story addition on their home. Our ordinance requires that they demonstrate that second story addition will not shade the solar access on your roof. And if it does, then there are mechanisms to compensate you accordingly for that. So we have done things to try and really push that as well. I don't know if I missed anything else in the chat, but we're kind of coming up at the end of our time here. So really appreciate this conversation today, and a lot of, new and emerging opportunities shared, especially during this conversation today, that I think will be great opportunities for us to continue to think about innovation in the city of Fremont in the years to come. So I just want to thank again, Donovan, Mia, and Zach for joining us today for this conversation. Robbie, do you want to pull up the closeout slides? Great, thank you. So just a reminder, please, if you haven't already, participate in the Consider It platform. You can find it at fremont.gov/CapConsiderIt. We really want all input from the community, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We want to know if there's something that you strongly disagree with, and we want to understand why, because our climate action plan is a roadmap for how we can get to this end goal of a post-carbon community. And we need to do that in partnership with our residents and businesses. So it's going to take, all hands on deck, and it's going to require us to work closely together. We'll keep the platform open for the next week or so to make sure you have time to participate before we close it. And then, Rob, you can move to the next slide. In terms of our longer process for the climate action plan, over the last handful of months, we've been doing a lot of community engagement. Now we're in this process of really digesting potential measures to include on our climate action plan. We're working closely with a consultant team to do the technical analysis for us to better understand the emission reduction impacts of various possible measures, and to help us prioritize those based on the feasibility of implementation, costs, funding opportunities, all of that. Then we'll be preparing a draft plan that will get circulated through our Environmental Sustainability Commission. We'll be talking to Planning Commission at various points, and probably do at least one or a few work sessions with the City Council before we finalize that plan and bring it to Council for approval. So there'll be a lot of opportunities in the coming months for continued participation in this process, and we, encourage your feedback, your support, your questions, your concerns as much as possible throughout this. So here's ways that you can continue to stay involved and aware of what's going on. Fremont.gov/climate-action is our landing page for our climate action plan update effort, and we'll be posting all sorts of materials coming out of these climate talks, including recordings of the presentations. It'll take us a few days because we need to get the captioning added to the videos before we post them, but we'll also we have some slides from past presentations, and we're going to be developing a list of frequently asked questions that we've heard during these climate talks and through some of our other outreach as well, including it on that platform. We also have a newsletter that you can sign up for. We send an email out maybe about once a month that includes updates related to programs and opportunities, if there's new rebates or incentive programs, if there's opportunities to participate in workshops like this one or with some of our partner agencies, we include that information as well. So it's really a way for you to stay updated on what we're doing in relation to environmental sustainability. And then finally, we have the Fremont Green Challenge platform. So the Green Challenge platform is a way that you at a household level can understand your carbon footprint and take action to reduce that further. So the platform has a number of opportunities that you can explore in all the different areas related to emissions. And what we've done is built in local resources so that, if you're interested in getting an electric vehicle, for instance, you can see all of the different opportunities to help you, reduce that upfront purchase costs and make the right decision for your household. So fremontgreenchallenge.org is that website. And with that, we would like to thank you again for joining us today and for participating in these discussions. I know some of the folks that were on the call today have been joining us all week long. So, hopefully this has been a great week for you. We have tried to cover a lot of information, and appreciate all of the comments and questions that everybody sent. Robbie and I are available to answer any follow-up questions, to talk about any additional, issues you might have, concerns you might have, or suggestions you might have for us. So please don't hesitate to follow up with us on the contact information here. And with that, we'll let you go. Happy Friday, everybody, and thanks for joining us.